Locked on Horned Frogs, a healthy fall camp. I will talk to you about how Kaz Kazadi, which has been a huge factor in this staff, in this team, in the strength and conditioning program, is making a big difference as we head into the 2024 season. We'll also talk about the emergence of Emani Bailey and more here on Locked on Horned Frogs.
You are Locked on Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. New goal for our show. So my guy, Brian Capers, who is a frequent commenter on YouTube, listens to the show, watches the show, which is fantastic. He was like, let's get to 1,000 subscribers before football season starts, which I would love that. If we want to shoot for that, let's go for it. We're at 778, I think, as we sit here I'm recording this on Wednesday, the 23rd, and we're like 9 days away from the season opener against Colorado. I'd like to get to 800 subscribers on YouTube before we get to that kickoff against Colorado. So we got a little bit of time. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that. If you want to tell a friend, that'd be great. If you want to create another account and subscribe that way, that's fantastic. I don't care how we do it, but let's try to get to 800 on YouTube. You can also subscribe where it is you get your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify. Give us a review if you listen to the audio podcast, or a rating. Let me know what things sound like. I've tried to make some adjustments. I actually made some adjustments based on some constructive criticism that I've seen, like in reviews and from people reaching out to me. So feel free to do that as well. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. TCU football. Fall camp is over. They're according to Sonny Dykes, they're going to start Colorado preparation in earnest tomorrow and Friday, or I guess you're probably listening to this on Thursday. So today and Friday, they'll really lock down, start to get a feel for, okay, what do the Buffaloes do? Let's get the cards out. Let's get our scout team ready. We are almost game week, which is super exciting. And one thing that I noticed as we kind of came to a close here in fall camp is it on the surface, it seems like this team is really healthy. Now, there's been a lot made all offseason about, are they going to be able to keep Chandler Morris healthy? Can he play, multiple games? Is he going to be upright with that smaller stature? Max was such a tank. And, Max would miss a game occasionally here and there, but by and large, he was healthy, consistent, available. Would love to see that from Chandler this year. And that remains to be seen. I mean, we won't really know until the season starts. But aside from Thomas Armstrong, who I think was going to be in the mix at the linebacker position this year, sort of hurt your depth there. But they're in a much better spot going into this season from a depth perspective than they were last year. And then as the year went on last year, that was really a position group where they got hit the hardest. So I feel good about the linebackers. But Thomas Armstrong missing some time is unfortunate. Also, Ish Burdine, who transferred in from Missouri a couple of off seasons ago, and unfortunately just haven't been able to stay healthy. Best of luck to Ish. I hope he can find a way to get back on the field, but hasn't happened yet. And hopefully he can be a contributor when he is there. Aside from that, though, you've had some nagging injuries. You've had some guys in red jerseys. Bud Clark was held out of practice for a few days after a hard fall. I know Avery Helm had a collision, and he was in a red jersey for a few days, but then he was back out there and seems to be okay. And Sonny Dykes acknowledged today, he had a press conference and said that the team is in good shape, said everybody of note practice except for Bud Clark. So the staff is resting him, and he will practice this week. Guys like Dalen Wright and Dominic Williams were in red jerseys at the last open practice. And so Dominic, that seems like, hey, that's a position at nose guard where you're going to take a lot of punishment. You're going to take a lot of hits. And so want to keep him up and available as much as possible. One thing, too, that they do, and I don't know, I don't think this correlates to red jerseys because that's no contact, and especially at that nose tackle position. I mean, you're really not – if you're not going full contact, aside from some, like, individual drills where you're working on snap count, that kind of thing, I'm not really sure what they'd have him doing. But they have technology that allows them to see like basically how much these guys are pushing themselves and how hard they're going at a given time, how much stress is on their body, how much energy they're exuding. And so they'll like individualize that and talk to guys about, hey, great practice today. We want you to work on this area, or, we'll customize the practice schedule a little bit so that maybe you're not going as hard next practice, or, hey, we got to pick this up. We got to pick up the pace, whatever the case may be. And so they have really good data that supports that. But I would think that's a precautionary thing. Dalen Wright's kind of fascinating that he's in a red jersey because he's already there, but he could have had a collision. I mean, there's all sort of protocols with that, especially if it's like a helmet-to-helmet situation. I'm speculating there. I'm not saying that's the case. But I think he'll be fine. And Wright is one of the more intriguing players on this roster. There's a lot of guys that don't have returning production, and you're wondering what they're going to look like. But Wright is really, he hasn't been in camp very long. Had a decent season at Minnesota last year, not like an amazing one. But I think anything you get from him is a huge plus. He has the potential, though, to be a great player. And I think it's the type of guy that you want to take a chance on in the portal. And maybe as the year goes on, he gets more comfortable and you'll see more from him. But he was taking it easy in practice. It's the last open practice that was. And they're being real smart about how they manage these guys. And Bud Clark as well looks like, they're kind of resting him after taking the fall in the scrimmage last week, and trying to monitor where he is and where he could be going, as they get ready for that Colorado game. These vets, I mean, it's not like in the NFL you'll see players that just don't really practice a lot. The NFL is also different because they have a collective bargaining agreement, and there's just not a lot of full contact practices anymore, especially once the regular season starts. But you'll see guys that are questionable like all week and then they end up playing. It's not that way in college, but I think there's definitely players that have been around for a while that they have a good sense of, okay, we don't have to get every rep every single day. We can kind of manage that and see what that looks like. But my overall point is this team looks really healthy. And, some of that is just good fortune. There's an element of luck with this that you can't calculate, right? Chandler Morris last year sort of gets in a weird situation where he's trying to change direction and he tries to turn around and his foot just gets caught strangely in the grass and he ends up twisting his knee and he goes down. The max comes in and the rest is history. That was not a injury where his body couldn't take contact. That was just a strange situation that happened. There was nothing to prevent it. However, in the last few years of the GP era, you saw a team that was just continually banged up. I mean, and it wasn't just in games. They would leave fall camp. They would leave practice weeks, and there would be so many injuries. And it was hard to keep up with who was available and who wasn't. One, because Gary was super close to the vest about injury reports, that kind of thing. And he's not the only coach that does that. Like, that's not me singling him out. It's just the reality. He didn't want that information out in the world. But then also, like, they just had so many injuries. And I remember, I'm not calling, like, I promise, I'm not calling Matt out. I would have said the same thing if I was asked this question. But I think it was back in 2018, that 2018 season where Sean Robinson started the year at quarterback. He gets hurt. And then Mike Collins also got hurt. By the end of the year, they were down to Grayson Muhlstein. And they somehow, miraculously, they made a bowl game, won that bowl game in the incredible Cheez-It Bowl, and ended up getting 7 wins. They go 7-6. And at the time, like, I guess foolishly was like, man, that was an incredible job. It was an incredible job they did to rally that team and get it together and win 7 games. I thought that was like affirmation that Gary still had it, that, everything was right on track. And once that team got healthy, they were going to make a huge push. But anyway, like, bottom line was they had a ton of injuries that year. It wasn't just at the quarterback position, but that was the main thing everybody focused on. And somebody asked, Matt Jennings was on the Purple Menace podcast with Billy Wessels, and somebody asked a question. They were like, "Hey, do we need to look into our strength and conditioning program because it really just seems like this team is snake bitten with injuries?" And Matt was like, "No, I mean, there's no way to really calculate this. There's no way to predict these things. It's just a fluky situation." And at the time, I agreed with him. Now, it happened year after year. And I think now that we see what Coach Kaz and his staff have done, not only in strength and conditioning, but also from a nutrition perspective, it's clear that they were light years behind at the end of the previous regime. Like, not that it was all bad, but it wasn't working. And so, that's one of the kind of details areas that I think Sonny gets that when he was hired, I didn't fully process, like, okay, this guy has a great feel for every aspect of running a college football program. But he does. He has a good sense of what needs to happen, what you have to be proficient in, and how it has to work to get you to a place where you are contending at a high level. And he's done that with what they do from a nutrition and strength and conditioning perspective. And he's said that, like he said, when he took the job, I remember that first off season before the 2022 season, he was asked about, like, what's been a challenge for you taking over here. And his first thing was, well, we really had to revamp everything they were doing from an off the field perspective just on the strength and conditioning side of it and the nutrition side of it. And that's something they've really made strides in, and it's paid off with a healthy fall camp. Now, can you stay healthy once the game starts? We'll have to see. Last season, they really did. And I think part of that was the strides that they've made. Also, part of it was some good fortune. Hopefully that will be the case again this year. But, hey, you never know, and we won't know until these games start. When we come back, is Emani Bailey running back number 1 for TCU football this year? We'll talk about that next in Locked On Horned Frogs. One of our great sponsors, eBay Motors. Right parts, right fit, right prices. I've told you guys before, I don't know a lot about cars. I'm not ashamed to admit that. It's just not an area where I have expertise. And so making decisions about my vehicle can be an overwhelming thing for me at times, but it doesn't have to be with eBay Motors. And, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same thing when it comes to your vehicle. You can't cut corners. You have to find the right part that fits correctly to your vehicle, the right accessory. And to do that, you need to head to eBay Motors. They have an eBay Guaranteed Fit program where you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. You simply add your ride to My Garage and then look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. It's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, at the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Motors, guaranteed fit, available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions, as always, do apply. So segment 2 here on Locked On Horned Frogs. Sonny Dykes was talking to the media today. Well, first, okay, I'm going to go a different direction for a second. This is something that maybe only I care about, but I find it interesting every year. Brett McMurphy, who now works for Stadium.com, is their top college football insider. He broke the news about the Iron Skillet, pausing after the 2025 season. He does a survey with college football coaches across the country, and he breaks it down by conference. And one of his questions is your favorite music artist. And I know, not everybody's a huge music person. I really like music. I'm not my favorite artist right now is probably Leon Bridges, if I had to guess. Give me your favorite artist in the YouTube comments, or you can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. What kind of music do you like to listen to? I'd love to hear that. I just find it interesting when I'm getting to know people. But Brett McMurphy asked this question to all Big 12 coaches. And if he asked Sonny this last year, I must have missed it. But I feel like it's a yearly series, so he probably did. Anyway, Sonny Dykes' favorite music artist, Dave Matthews Band, which kind of surprised me. I mean, it shouldn't. Sonny's around that age where Dave Matthews would be a popular pick. Dave Aranda, also a Dave Matthews fan. So, hey, there you go. two rivals can unite on a love of Dave Matthews. I remember Matt Rule was also, like he said, Dave Matthews was his favorite band back when he was at Baylor. So a popular artist among coaches. So Sonny goes Dave Matthews. I thought he might go country music. Like that was just the vibe I get from Sonny. But he also seems like a guy that has pretty varied interest, and that's a good pulse on what young people are into. Not that young people are into Dave Matthews. I doubt there's a lot of guys in that room that are like bumping Dave Matthews day in and day out. But what I mean is he just seems like someone who would have a pretty wide range of different artists in his music library. But he goes with Dave Matthews. Other Big 12 coaches that I thought were intriguing. Dana Holgerson said Post Malone. And, sometimes like coaches will say a popular rap artist like that, and you can kind of tell like, okay, this is obviously a bit. You're just trying to act like you're cool and connect with the kids. I genuinely think that Dana Holgerson probably listens to Post Malone. Kalani Sitake, Bob Marley guy, which is caught my eye. Chris Kleiman likes Cole Swindell. Brett Venables likes Kane Brown. I'm not a big Kane Brown fan, but okay, Brett, do your thing. And then finally, the one that just floored me, Mike Gundy, Prince. And listen, I mean, Prince was like one of the top artists in the world in a formative time of Mike Gundy's life. But, yeah, I thought Gundy would be a country music guy. He's not. Apparently, he's an R&B soul guy. He likes Prince, so good for him. And, yes, that is on Brett McMurray's Twitter if you want to investigate it further. But Sonny Dykes, Dave Matthews guy. So if you were curious, now you know. He also spoke to the media today. And I think one thing that is developing, they haven't come out and said this explicitly, but it's happening. By the way, if there was any question, which there wasn't, in that interview that Sonny did with 365 the other day, he all but said that Chandler is the guy, right? Like they asked him specifically about Chandler Morris. He said, yeah, that's our dude. And so he's quarterback one. If there was anybody who was still kind of like thinking that there might be a possibility of a battle in their head, it's not happening. But I feel like most of you knew that. But he was asked about a scrimmage that they had yesterday, and he said Emani Bailey stood out, and JoJo Earl stood out as well, which is good to know. JoJo has had kind of a quiet camp. It doesn't mean he's playing poorly. It's just you haven't heard his name as much. But I definitely think he's one of those guys, along with John Paul Richardson and others, that are going to be a huge part of this wide receiver room and is a special talent. And then Steven Johnson followed up and said, "Is Emani Bailey shown that he's the guy at running back?" And Dykes said that he has been the most consistent during camp. And so I've been pretty consistent in saying this offseason that it's going to be sort of a revolving door at running back. I'm not sure there's going to be one clear alpha. I think Trey Sanders is going to get a lot of opportunities. Trey Sanders and Emani Bailey are very different backs. Trey's bigger. He, at least seems stronger. He's coming off that really tough car accident and still recovering from that, recuperating from that. And so I think that hinders some of his explosiveness, but very patient runner. Good job. Does a good job of running between the tackles. Bailey has shown that explosion, that burst, coming off the line, finding a lane, and then just accelerating in a real special way. And it appears that he's making the push to be the guy. I think he's going to be the starting running back against Colorado. It doesn't mean that Trey Sanders won't get a lot of carries. I think he will. And maybe Cam Cook plays some. There'll be different scenarios to this. But if I had to put my money on somebody being the starting running back like 2 weeks ago, I would have said Trey Sanders. And now I've changed my mind. I'm pretty confident it's going to be Emani Bailey. And so good for Emani. I mean, he transferred in last year from Louisiana. I think he expected to have a bigger role last season. It didn't happen, and I don't feel like it was because of, something that he did. It was just simply the fact that Kendre Miller was an outstanding running back, had a really good game with the Saints the other night. And Amari DiMercado was a really complete back, with somebody that had been around for a long time, understood what had to happen to play at this level. I think had a really good understanding of what it meant to be a complete running back and pass protection, catching the ball in the backfield, being reliable, all those things. And so Emani can now build on that this season. He knows what has to happen. He knows what he has to work on. And he has seen the opportunity and has gone and gotten it. And if he ends up being the dude, I feel really good about that because, they brought in Trey Sanders as someone to compete with him, as someone to give a complementary style and a different look to the defense. And Emani got it done and won that job. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's going to be pretty split, those carries numbers. And I think the story with Trey Sanders is amazing. And I feel like he has a chance to be a great back for TCU this year. It just appears that Emani Bailey is sort of emerging as, one of those guys that is getting it done and is making a push to be the starting running back. And so, that's sort of news on the depth chart front. And it's going to be really fun once we have games and results to actually talk about, and we can quit talking in hypotheticals and just, practice reports and that kind of thing. But seems like number 9 is going to be the guy out there for TCU football at the running back position, at least to start the season. When we come back, Sonny Dykes had a quote about the Iron Skillet game, and I'll give you that information and then an audience question or two before we go. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. This episode of Locked On Horned Frogs is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy. If you are wondering, is this something I should try? I know getting help for mental health there can be a real stigma around it. People can have questions about, they don't even know where to get started. I have, gone through some therapy. It's been great for me in handling my anxiety. As I mentioned, my kids, we have them in a couple different therapy programs. They had some trauma in their past before we adopted them out of foster care, and it's been really beneficial, not only for them, but for my family as a whole. And so it's something that if you feel that push to make the jump, I would encourage you to do it. And BetterHelp is the way to go. It's online therapy. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. You can visit betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege and get 10% off your first month. If you're thinking about starting therapy or giving it a try, you should try with BetterHelp. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So if you're sitting there and you're like, man, well, I don't know the first thing about going to get a therapist, what is covered by my insurance, all those questions that can overwhelm you, fill out a quick questionnaire and go to betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege to get 10% off your first month. They will match you with a therapist. If it's not, you're not feeling it after a few sessions, you can switch therapists, no questions, no extra charge. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedoncollege. Before we go, Sonny Dykes was also asked today about pausing that rivalry game with SMU. He said, if we want to talk like we're a big-time football program, we need to walk like we're a big-time football program, and that includes having more home football games. He wants the Frogs to play 7 to 8 home games a year. This story from a national perspective has already sort of kind of fizzled. I think most people have said their piece about it and moved on. We'll hear about it during the TCU-SMU rivalry games over the next few years. Bottom line is it's clear. Sonny Dykes has said it. Jeremiah Nadia said it. They were tired of going to Dallas every year of the year. I mean, they didn't say it in those terms, but they want to have extra home games. They want to have a chance to schedule most likely a G5 opponent most years. Maybe occasionally it'll be a higher profile opponent to come to the Carter and have a chance for their fans to show out and show up and be loud and create a great atmosphere. And so, it's hard to argue against that. And hopefully TCU can take advantage of having that extra home game by winning more games, but then also bringing in some big-time opponents, non-conference opponents that TCU fans want to see. And we'll see if they do that. But, again, I think this is something that people have talked about it. Everybody's kind of giving their opinion, and SMU fans are upset. Understand that. There are folks that are upset because they see it as another sign of regionality and some of the charm of college football ending, but people aren't going to worry about this forever, right? Like we're getting we'll hear about it during SMU week, and then it'll die off again. And we'll see if anything changes here in the next few months. Before we go, I did an episode about Colorado that aired, I think, Monday night into Tuesday, and a Colorado fan commented on it, and I wanted to give my thought there. And my premise of that episode was like, Colorado with all their new faces on the field and then the coaching staff, there's really a surprise factor to what they can do, and it's going to be difficult for TCU to prepare for that and find a way to match it. But ultimately, I think TCU is just a much better team, and they're going to overwhelm them from a talent and depth perspective as the game goes on. CT Smith said, from a CU fan perspective, the real issue is everyone uses the number of transfers to diminish the quality of players brought in. What experience does the TCU QB have? He has less than 1,000 yards passing his career. Yet you're comfortable saying he's better than Shedeur Sanders. Have you guys seen Dylan Edwards? Your eyes are going to pop out of your head when you see him. Every time Edwards has the ball, it could go to the house. So Dylan Edwards is a four-star recruit, freshman running back for Colorado, really talented player. To address that one, I thought I was pretty clear about the fact that, Colorado's bringing in some really talented players. I don't think all 70 of them are like five-star talent. I mentioned some of the great players they have. Shedeur Sanders, I think, is a good quarterback. I will say one thing about Shedeur. I don't remember saying that Chandler Morris is better than him. I believe that is really possible. It's true. But yeah, fair point. Like, Chandler Morris does not have a lot of experience as a quarterback in college. However, you mentioned Dylan Edwards, who's a true freshman running back. He looks like a special talent. I agree. But if your argument's that Chandler Morris hasn't proven anything, we'll have to see Dylan Edwards prove something too. And I think we have to see Shedeur Sanders prove something at the Power 5 level. Not to take away from his talent, but he played at Jackson State, which was an FCS school, did a really good job there. He played at a very tiny private school in Texas, and talent evaluators agreed that he was a very talented prospect, but he also played against competition at the TAPS level that wasn't great. And he's played against competition at the FCS level that doesn't equal what he's going to see against TCU in that opening game. And so I think it's fair to have questions about what Shedeur is going to do and how well he's going to play in that season opener. Yeah, Chandler Morris hasn't played a lot. I do feel like this offensive system is a good fit for him, and he's been around for a long time. So I think he's going to be okay. Didn't play particularly well against Colorado in the first half last year, but then started to figure things out in the second half before getting injured. Has played well against Baylor. Did some nice things against Kansas State when he came in relief of Max Duggan a few years ago. I think Chandler's a good quarterback, and I think he's going to show that. But yes, he does have to prove that. But my confidence about TCU goes beyond that. It's just the fact that they won 13 games last year. They lost a lot of people, but they also have a good number of people coming back. They filled in some holes in their roster with the transfer portal. I just think this is a good football team, and they're going to show that against the Buffaloes in a few weeks. But that's why they play the games, and that's why it's fun to talk about it before and after, and we'll continue to do that here on Locked on Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.